Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to North Shore Live, Cooper's Corner. We're live this evening. This is August the 21st, 2013. It was a bit warm today. I hope that you are all well hydrated. Please look in on your neighbors, your family, your friends, and if you have any pets that you leave outside in a dog run, please make sure that they have ample water to hydrate themselves. And on days that are this warm, either walk them or leave them out for a short period of time and then bring them back into the air conditioning. The pets swelter just as the humans do, so please be watchful always of the weather, always of two-legged friends and four-legged friends as well. We need them all, and watch for yourself in case of being locked out of your car. Do not put your air conditioning on as you get in. Let your doors be open, windows down, something having to do with the plastics in the air conditioning that can cause great harm, pulmonary harm. So let the car cool off a little bit, then put your air conditioning on. Read that off the internet. This is not something made up. This is something from a doctor's office that have checked into it. I first want to just thank the group, the Honor Flight group from the Exchange Club of North Chicago, the only one in Lake County. And they sent me more information because they're taking the gentleman to Washington, D.C. Mr. Hudson, he was Marines, fought in the Korean conflict, and I believe there's a Mr. Smith. He was in Vietnam. We didn't get to meet Mr. Smith. And there's a couple of other gentlemen. If you'll let me please just read this. This is, please join us as we celebrate our veterans with our first Honor Flight send-off. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Free food and refreshments, free to the public. Friday, September 13th, 2013, 9 a.m., 1801 Sheridan Road in North Chicago. Please take time to celebrate our veterans as they begin their honor flight journey to Washington, D.C. to visit their memorial. Please take time to show our veterans that you appreciate their sacrifice for your freedom. If you need to connect with anybody, it's honorflightlakecountY@gmail.com, all one word. And a phone number is 847-282-0374. And I'm just so proud to be able to participate with the Exchange Club for this Friday, September 13th, 2013, 9 a.m. And please contact them, 847-282-0374. It's the honor flight to send the veterans back to Washington, D.C. to see their monument that has been put up for the veterans. Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, U.S. Coast Guard, wherever you may be. Okay, thank you so much for that. This evening's program, these are all very serious things that we're going to be talking about this evening. And as you read the front page, Dr. Rudd is our guest this evening, as is Ruth Fuller, who is a freelance reporter. And this is Ruth's information that she published, and that says, expert who helped convict woman in child killing admits error. And this was dated August the 12th, 2013. And this is the Calusinski case, and Dr. Rudd is certainly the coroner for that situation that transpired, and it was Ruth Fuller who wrote the story. So without any further ado, let me please introduce my guests to you. Dr. Thomas Rudd, to my direct left, that way, who is a Lake County coroner, and to Dr. Rudd's immediate left, is Ruth Fuller. Welcome both.
Thank you.
And, well, I don't know where to jump in on this. This is really overwhelming, but informational, and that's what needs to be told, is the true points of the situation.
Mm-hmm. Well,
so
I think
Dr.
maybe
Rudd,
we could ask Ruth, who has been following the story, if she can brief us on how it started, and then I can fill in where we got up to the story.
Okay, very good.
Sure.
All right, Ruth, you're on.
Sure. Well, I've been covering this case back since its inception in 2009. Benjamin Kingen was 16 months old, and he was attending a daycare in Lincolnshire, Minnesubi Daycare. Melissa Calusinski was one of the daycare workers, one of his daycare workers, and Benjamin died at the daycare. And the daycare workers at the time were questioned. All of the workers at his daycare were questioned after he died. Melissa was one of them that was questioned. And subsequently, after a 10-hour interrogation, she gave a confession, which her attorneys and she later said was coerced. They say in part because Melissa has a very low IQ, and that's and they say that it was a rough confession. I'm sorry, a rough interrogation. She did not confess anything until at least 6 hours into the interrogation. She hadn't eaten all day. She didn't sleep much the night before. And during the interrogation, the officers gave her information that they suggested might have been ways the boy could have died. And she subsequently agreed with their scenarios. So, for example, they first said, well, perhaps it was an accident. And she agreed that, yes, it was an accident. They later said that couldn't have been the way he died. So she then later said, they said, well, I think that maybe you did something, but you didn't mean to do it. And she agreed, well, yes, maybe I did something and didn't mean to do it. And then the final way, they said, well, we think you did something and you intentionally hit him because you were angry. And she agreed. So the confession, which happened after 10 hours of interrogation, they told her she would get to go home if she gave them this confession. So she thought she was going home at the end of it. So then she was subsequently booked, obviously, and she's been in jail since 2009, January 2009. She was found guilty, and she was sentenced to 33 years in prison. And then I guess what we can, I'm sorry, I'll just tell you this, that during the trial there was evidence presented that there was, by the defense, that there was a pre-existing condition in this little boy, and that could have been what actually caused his death. But the jury obviously believed the prosecution's theory that she caused his death by slamming him to the ground, which is what she ultimately said in her confession. So maybe I'll let Dr. Rudd take it from there to what his new information is.
While campaigning for the office, I had met Mr. Paul Calusinski, the father of Melissa. And I discussed the case with him, and he asked me to look into it if I wanted, and got in. And I said, sure. As I've said on the program before, no case no case in a coroner's office or medical examiner's office is ever closed. There's always new evidence that can appear. So I decided to look at the case when I got in, but before I did it, I had actually forgot. And then about 3 weeks into being into the office, I got a letter with a packet from Paul DeLuca, one of the attorneys for Melissa. And lo and behold, there was a nice long letter detailing the case. There were some materials in the envelope that were not in the original file because they were, I think, the autopsy surgeon, Dr. Upil Choi's materials that must have been sent to DeLuca. I pulled out the chart. I quickly reviewed it. I pulled out the slides, and then it was like a brick hit me in the head. The slides from the brain clearly showed prior injury. Okay, and if it wasn't illegal, I would have brought a slide and showed it, because you could just pick up the slide, and you see two membranes clearly on the side, each having a tinctorial difference, meaning a color difference. Okay, they were about 2 to 3 millimeters. One of which is a membrane with fibrosis, meaning an injury that's healing. And I looked at it and I could not believe it could be missed. So I read Dr. Choi's microscopic report on these slides, as well as the gross, and he makes no mention of it whatsoever. Had he seen it, he probably would have ordered a special stain called iron, which indicates a chronicity, a chronic injury, which would make it 100% diagnostic. So I thought, good God, what do we have here? So before doing anything further, I felt I had to read the entire trial transcript, especially since she did admit to doing it, and I also watched it. So I spent the next 4 months reading the transcript over and over and over and over, and I showed slides to a lot of people. Now I thought, okay, we do have a case of a chronic injury, because I read the history. This child was injured 5 weeks prior to his demise with a very large bump or hit in the back of the head. And he was showing signs and symptoms of an injury and was taken to his pediatrician the next day. Unfortunately, no signs and symptoms. Okay? And the clinician would have had to act on the prior history, but he didn't see it, so he played conservatively. Not a bad choice. And since I think children are looked at by a pediatrician once a month for the first 2 years, so he was coming in. So I'm thinking, well, how do I examine this and not look like I'm siding with somebody, meaning the defense? Because I could call in an expert, but so did the defense, and so did the prosecution. And then it was a light bulb in a dark room. I thought, oh my gosh, I've got the former medical examiner of Cook County working for me, Dr. Nancy Jones. So I thought, I'll see if she'll do it, because she helped me in the Darren Hanna case. So I packed it up, the materials. I gave her everything I had. It was like 2 shopping bags, huge amount of material, slides. And I gave it to her. Lo and behold, she calls back after a week or 2 and says, I completely agree with you. This child had a major injury prior to his demise, and I will testify to that fact. So I thought, okay, what do we do next? Dr. Choi looked at the case. He was the signature service guy. There was another pathologist called in that works for the coroner's office, but he was a consultant on the case. We can get to that later, and then testified. But he had no signature to the case. Okay, so he had no responsibility of the actual doing of the case. So I thought, what if I sent Dr. Choi a letter with Dr. Jones's findings? Because Dr. Jones and Dr. Choi have worked together in one way or another, either in Lake County or Cook County, for about 26 years. They respect each other. So I sent him a letter with the report by Jones. He wrote me back, very nice letter, said he'd be happy to come in. He comes in, spends 2 hours with me, and agrees on the major finding that there is a chronic subdural hematoma, meaning a prior injury that he missed. Now, a lot of doctors have huge egos. I wasn't about to ask him to change his mind in writing. So I thought, I gave him some materials, new concepts of abusive head trauma, gave him the packet, gave him some of my microscopics that I took, because I took iron stains and they confirmed the findings. And I did a lot of studies. I did his, I did the one defense witness's slides, I did my own slides, and we looked at it. So I sent him home with a booklet and my photomicroscope. So, I took microscopic pictures so he didn't have to take the slides. And I wrote, that was Thursday, I wrote a letter on Friday asking, would he mind putting out a corrected report? And he sent me a letter back saying he'll seriously consider it, just provide him a short, concise clinical history, which I did. And he came back and essentially sent me a letter, and we won't go into great detail. Yes, there is a prior injury, and yes, I made a mistake, whereupon the defense team from Melissa went out there, interviewed him, talked to him, and got an affidavit saying he made a mistake. And that's where we stand now with the history of the case.
Is it okay for me to ask you if you brought this to the attention of the state's attorney?
Well, thank you for asking. That's a very key point. After I got Dr. Jones's report, and prior to talking to Dr. Choi, yes, I did send him Dr. Jones's report with a nice one-page letter saying, this is what we have. This is now going into the chart of Benjamin Kingen. You need any questions answered? No response.
That's to Mr. Nierheim.
The state's attorney.
State's attorney.
Yeah, it was hand-delivered by my chief deputy coroner.
Okay.
I actually contacted State's Attorney Nierheim for this article and asked him, you know, what he thinks of the findings in Dr. Choi's report. He said he hadn't seen the report yet, but that it really wouldn't make a difference because the jury did have evidence of a pre-existing injury and they still found her guilty. And he said that even if there was a pre-existing injury, which he called microscopic, he said that she could still be found guilty if she did something to exacerbate the injury. So now what we haven't told you yet is that Benjamin has had a history of throwing tantrums and hitting his head back on the ground when he threw the tantrums, and that was well documented. His mother talked about the tantrums in the trial, and he had done this something like 3 times. I think it was 3 times that day. So I think at this point, what the defense has said that they would like to do is discuss whether it was a tantrum that might have exacerbated the injury. And that's their argument, that it was a tantrum that exacerbated the injury and not anything that Melissa did. That's their argument. So, and, you know, of course, State's Attorney Nierheim's argument is that Melissa confessed to this, to throwing him down, and that she is still responsible for doing something that exacerbated the injury.
Well, you just explained before that they gave her options or gave her information that could have, or would have, or should have, or she could have grasped any one, but she took all 3 because I believe it's noted that she has a disability, and so
she's a low IQ.
A low IQ doesn't mean that she's harmful to anyone. It's just that her IQ is, you know, I don't think she could be whatever hopes that she wanted to be, other than a loving person to children in a daycare center.
Well, I mean, I think, you know, what obviously State's Attorney Nierheim will argue is that the jury saw the video as well, and they convicted her. So it's obviously up to each person to decide. Kathleen Zellner, her attorney, says she's, you know, one of the most harmless, pleasant people you'll ever meet. And, you know, she has absolutely no criminal history. She has, all her life, she has done nothing but care for children. she has no record of ever having any disciplinary action. So it's, you know, I'm a journalist, I'm just presenting facts. It's up to juries to decide, it's up to the appellate court to decide, you know, it's up to State's Attorney Nierheim, and, you know, the judge, if they're presented with a petition to reconsider. But certainly, you know, State's Attorney Nierheim will argue one way and her attorneys will argue another.
Well, let's look at it this way. I can only tell you as John Q. Public. I'm, you know, I do the interviews on programs, but I'm a resident of Lake County. I'm a voter in Lake County. I'm a parent of 7 children, and I have grandchildren. And this all seems to be predicated on some type of violence that she committed upon the child, when in fact her demeanor and her character doesn't show that. And if there's information that is showing something medically different, that's new information, wouldn't it be beholding to the state's attorney to show the public that he's doing the right thing and he's doing his job? Because innocent people, we know, go to jail, and that he has now found a truthful statement and medical information and evidence that shows that there was a pre-existing problem.
Correct.
And so he should get raves and votes and pats on the back to stand forward and say, listen, due to an oversight that was evidently created, we have now found further information that shows that this was a pre-existing situation, and that Ms. Calusinski should be reheard or re-examined on the situation, because it's nothing that she physically did to this child, but that was already fulminating in the brain of the child to begin with.
Well, go on.
Let me speak to the injury so that the public knows why it's important that there was a pre-existing injury. When you're talking about blood on the brain, which is what a head injury is when you get hit or dropped, it's called a subdural hematoma, big word for blood under the skull pushing the brain. That's very dangerous because it's pushing the brain, and the brain doesn't work very well with that. And what happens if you don't die immediately from that is just like when you cut yourself and you form a scab. Same thing is occurring in the brain, so to speak. The body recognizes the blood doesn't belong there, so it sends in white cells to basically chew up the red cells, because the body's an amazing organism. It wants to get rid of that stuff, but it realizes there's certain things in those red cells that are worth saving, i.e. iron. Key point, iron. Remember that word. So you got scavenger cells. Now how do they get there? They have to form little bitty blood vessels to get up there, okay? And while they're forming the blood vessels, this area is quite friable, easily broke. Just like if you hit your scab after an hour, what happens?
Opens up.
Opens up. So it's laying down fibrosis. In other words, it's hardening it so that it can do its job. Now, as you're walking around with that, this child has a history of bouncing his head. It's like hitting that wound. He hits that head. He hits that head, and it may bleed a little bit more. Hits it again, bleeds a little more. Hits it another time, he dies. But it doesn't look like a real traumatic head bounce or hit. It just takes a little bit. You hit the right membrane, opens up, blood comes out. The key to the autopsy by Dr. Choi is that he said the blood gushed out, making it sound, when he opened the brain, making it sound like there's this dike that broke.
Yeah,
okay. When he measured, it was 8 cc's If you convert that, that's a teaspoon. It's a teaspoon of blood. How does a teaspoon of blood gush? Okay? What you had was an old injury. The 8 cc's of blood came out was fresh. Okay, that was the event that caused the demise of the child, was that 8 cc's. All right? But it just burst open and it caused more bleeding. So that's the key. And we know there was an injury 8 weeks prior. So we need to find out why that occurs. Now, in terms of what should happen, I can only deal with the cause and manner of death. I can't give you an opinion as your coroner as whether she's guilty or not guilty. I can't even tell you whether the case should be open. But I can tell you that the state's attorney, the new one who campaigned, said that he was going to get a conviction integrity unit, for want of better terms. But that's really what it is. It's a conviction integrity unit.
Conviction.
She's convicted. Let's make sure it was right. Okay? Let's make sure it's right. As the coroner, I can say, Mr. Nerheim, you have formed this committee. Why are you refusing to give it to the committee? Because the committee does not have any power to take it back to court. All it has is to form an impression and give him their opinion, and he acts as he sees fit. That's all. I think it's worthwhile. Okay.
He did say to me that he will always relook at a case if at any time if he sees a reason for it. And so, you know, at the time of the printing of this article, he said that there was no reason to look at this case. But, you know, maybe he will. Maybe after he reads Dr. Choi's letter, he'll decide, or his affidavit, he'll decide to relook at it. You know, while you were mentioning Dr. Choi's findings, I was thinking about the fact that State's Attorney Nerheim said that Benjamin went from fine to dead. And maybe you could talk a little bit about why he would go from appearing fine that day to dead, and you know, whether medically, if that makes sense.
Yeah, actually, I believe what the State's Attorney is saying is that at the last minute he looked fine and then died. But if you review the testimony, this child was having lapses of just immediate lethargy. Okay? He would just fall asleep. He was having episodes of projectile vomiting for no real reason. He didn't have flu. He didn't have a stomach flu. He didn't eat anything.
He had no fever.
He had no fever, and he would just... Now, projectile vomiting means it is shot out almost like a cannon. That's usually a brain injury, usually. And don't forget, the body is trying to heal this wound, and so you can have normal walking, et cetera, and maybe the kid, because we know he has a history of bumps his head, he rebleeds a little bit, and he starts having signs and symptoms that, you know, are not normal, but they're intermittent. They don't always occur. So unless you're watching the kid for 24 hours with a camera, you're not going to see that. Okay? Now here's the killer finding. It just dawned on me. Thank you for bringing that up. He had a twin. And from the time of the injury in October of '08 to the time of his death, these twins went in to be examined by the pediatrician. The sister had a 50th percentile skull circumference, meaning as the brain is growing. Benjamin's hit 99. Why would a twin?
Well, and it went from the 50th percentile to the 99th.
Correct. In other words, he was at the 50th percentile prior to the injury. So was his sister, twin. Just before he dies, he's at the 90th some percentile.
Wow.
That in itself is a warning that something's wrong, okay, and should be looked into, especially with a history of banging your head and having injuries, okay? So it really needs to be, at least it should be given to this conviction integrity unit to take a look at the case. See if it should be, something else should be done. I almost said retried, but I can't say it.
Well, you don't
I
have to
just
say
did.
it, but I'm, as I say, I'm a resident here, and he was, voted in office, and what would give someone actually he's a state's attorney, but a politician, he had to go secure votes, a better, feeling about himself, and for the county to have a better feeling about their state's attorney, that he will not give up to protect the rights of a human being, specifically because new information has been found. I mean, there is so much corruption in all these counties, and Cook and DuPage, wherever. What the corruption is, it's uncontrollable until you really find an agency, whether it be the federal government, to step in and tap someone on the shoulder, making a comment that there's something going on here, and that innocent people, a multitude, not one, not two, not three, a multitude of innocent people are going to jail, and the taxpayers are paying for it, when in fact they're not even guilty. It's just a happening that occurred, and that the appropriate people that should have been watching for it, glanced over it, or didn't see it, or it wasn't brought to their attention. But once brought to their attention, they should absolutely and definitely stand forward and say, there's a problem here because I didn't see this, and we need to look over this case again. There is someone's life in jeopardy. A young girl, she's only in her early 20s.
26 now. She was 22 when
22 years old. That in itself is criminal. That in and of itself is criminal.
Let me describe something else. Again, the jury found her guilty, but there was some key testimony of the last 10 minutes prior to the child's death. The regulation is that you have to have one daycare worker to every 4 children, so apparently there were 8 children. They were getting a snack, and there were 2 people there, including Melissa, and then I believe the other lady's name was Nancy. Children getting irritated because they were done with their snack. They wanted to get out and play. So apparently Melissa said, I need to go to the bathroom before that happens. And this other daycare worker, Nancy, started removing some of the children. Now they're in a kitchen area that has tile floor. Apparently she did pick up Benjamin. Remember, now Melissa's in the bathroom. She picks up Benjamin, puts him down, and I guess because he moves a lot and is ornery and likes to, 16-month-old boy, he bangs his head. Now, it isn't the type of bang that you go, oh my God, okay, kid bangs their heads. I think they bang their heads, I think on average there's 2 to 4 times a day, okay? But it wasn't serious. So she picked him up, looked at him, and he looked okay. And I think it stated that she put him in a chair.
He crawled
to the chair? Okay.
Chair.
Melissa comes out of the bathroom. It wasn't an injury that Nancy felt was even reportable to Melissa as far as watching him. So she starts taking care of everybody else. Nancy goes to wash some dishes. Now, Nancy's not that far away. She is in another room, but there's a doorway. Okay, and she's doing dishes. And I guess Melissa's taking care of the other children. She looks over, and Benjamin is having a problem. So there is no testimony that says what she confessed to happened. Think about it. The testimony said the injuries were equivalent to, I'm talking about the prosecution witnesses, to a child falling 2 stories. Oh. Now, as a pathologist, adult or child falling 2 stories, a pretty gruesome sight.
Yes, like a watermelon. Like a watermelon.
Close.
Cantaloupe, yeah.
It could even be worse, depending on how they come down.
And concrete.
Correct.
Hard surface.
We didn't have that. Secondly, I believe the Illinois Department of Child and Welfare did an investigation, found no evidence of mistreatment. Even the law enforcement did not suspect any wrongdoing, because they did the autopsy on one day and they didn't have anybody in custody, and they didn't expect the findings they got. Once they got the findings, they felt they had to
make an arrest.
They had to find somebody who possibly could have done this. So they reenacted the autopsy the next day while they were interviewing Melissa. I've never heard of that.
Neither have I.
With the child's body.
Oh, no.
Yes.
Oh, no. Ruth.
They reenacted it. And they had, whoever was interrogating her was on the phone, and every time she denied it, they were saying, well, we've got the authorities here, and they're saying that's not the case, Melissa. You really, don't make it bad for yourself. Okay, so we got it reenacted. I've never heard of that. Yeah. And I have gone across the country and talked to a lot of people in the National Association of Medical Examiners, and they're just shaking their head on this. Okay, you're reenacting an autopsy?
That's incredible. That's incredible.
Why?
Not reenacting an autopsy. They reenacted how it could have happened.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when she said, oh, maybe when they suggested maybe he slipped, and she said, oh, maybe he slipped, well, they tried slipping him.
With the body.
With the body.
With the body.
I missed that. Oh, okay.
That's
I'm glad
gross.
I missed it.
That's gross. I have never heard of that.
They tried all the different ways that she suggested.
I mean, that
using
in
the
and of
body.
itself is, what is it, some kind of there's a law against
Abuse
to a decedent. That's a horrific thing. What is, was this by Neerheim's office, or is this by the police?
By law enforcement.
By law enforcement.
And the previous coroner's office. The coroner wasn't there. That was one of the deputy coroners.
Right.
That's horrific.
Chief deputy coroner.
Oh my goodness sakes, that's horrific.
They were trying to establish whether it could have happened that way. So they were.
But you have a decedent. The body is entirely different after death than it is while a child is alive and kicking or moving or backing up or whatever it is. How can they do that? Why don't they just use a bag of beans? Why would they use the human being? The human being, the dead child. That's terrible. Yeah. That's terrible. I mean, it sounds, this is so, donkey backwards. It's just so backwards.
That was the way they were trying to establish.
They don't even, it doesn't even sound like they're professionals.
Well, I can't say. It wouldn't have happened under my watch.
And for the sake of this young girl, Melissa Calusinski, the fact that she's diminished in her capacity academically or whatever you want to call it, but she's a caring person, and was she with her attorney? I mean, did she have?
She did not have an attorney.
She had no attorney with her. I mean, the attorney would have told her. Unfortunately, the law enforcement does have the right to lie. They will do whatever they can to get a conviction.
Most people do not know that.
No, that's what I'm saying. But an attorney would have known that and would have steered her in the right direction, either to answer the question or don't answer the question, because there was no finding. There was no proof to provide to her. She is entitled to proof what they are saying. She's entitled to that. Right. If she's just agreeing to it and they are, not telling her the truth and trying to pad a story to get a conviction, they are in the wrong, not she.
Well, there's a lot of people who believe that if you confess to a crime, you're guilty. And so,
But under what circumstances, Ruth? Under what circumstance? You said 10 hours of grilling.
At least 6.
Well,
she confessed.
Well, no water, no food, no.
They offered her water and food, but she hadn't eaten all day. They gave her breaks, but
But look at the stress that she's under to begin with, and she's diminished in understanding what the whole thing is all about to begin with.
Right.
It's actually, what are they doing? They're persecuting an innocent person for a situation of a child. Not to say that it's not important. That's not it. It is important. But this child, if the parents knew, or the physician, the pediatrician knew, that this child had a behavioral problem with throwing his head, why didn't they take protective care? Why didn't they get him a helmet? I have seen on many occasions, I do a lot of charity work for a lot of organizations, and I see a lot of these children with cerebral palsy. They have helmets on, they bang their head, they have no control. This youngster, then that should have been the case. Why are they blaming a caretaker, a caregiver, a caretaker that is only with this child a short amount of time for a previous injury that she wasn't even involved with? So my question to you is the Lake County State's Attorney, Mr. Nerheim, going to stand tall and be a hero and have the voters cheer him on because there is an innocent person, a disabled innocent person?
I don't think you can say disabled.
Well, she's challenged, okay.
She's
she just
low
did,
IQ.
or diminished in IQ, okay. Why, is he going to stand tall and say, listen, hey, we all make mistakes. That's why they put erasers on pencils. Make a joke of it, make however you want. Give this girl opportunity to be able to show herself.
I think it's difficult. I think it's difficult for anyone in office when there's a child involved, because, and I have to say in his defense, because when a child dies, you automatically worry about the parents and their feelings, because and I certainly saw the emotion of the parents in this case.
Absolutely,
and
absolutely.
And you feel so much for the
Well,
parents.
I defend him as
Right.
well as a state's attorney.
Right,
He's
right,
doing his job.
Right. And it was very hard as a mother myself. And I have a child the same age as Benjamin, and who was in daycare at the same time as Benjamin was, and so I felt all those emotions. And,
Sure.
it was very difficult. So, I'm wanting to be a neutral journalist, but sure, my emotions are involved as well.
Yes.
But there's, I'm sure it's difficult to talk about reopening this case and break the hearts of these parents who think it's done, it's over. We've put this to rest. We know what happened to our child. So I'm sure there's a big part of that involved when he's considering reopening this. But I'm sure as a state's attorney, he's also has to consider if a person has been wrongfully convicted.
That's right, the
and
innocence of one.
Exactly. So I'm sure he has to consider both those things when he considers
I
this
have a
case.
question to ask, and maybe you had already asked it, or of law enforcement, or the preschool.
Sure.
Everybody's got cameras. Everybody's got videos. Are there or were there at the time any video cameras in the room where the child was?
There were not. That would have
Unfortunately
certainly
not.
that would have
Unfortunately
certainly
That would have
wrapped
done.
this case up.
Yeah.
No.
It's unfortunate it wasn't there.
The interrogation was videotaped.
Yeah.
I've seen the interrogation 3 times. Right. I mean, the jury saw the interrogation.
Was she violent?
In the interrogation?
The interrogation?
Oh gosh, no.
Oh no.
Okay.
She looked like a cornered animal.
Now,
That's a personal opinion.
Now you see, let me just tell you, this is just coming from John Q. Public. Anybody on the street would have asked you. If in fact she was interrogated for such a long time, denied whatever, but her water, resting, whatever, and she didn't show violence. That's got to show you that they have pushed her to whatever point they had to push her, but she never showed violence outward to anyone. Even with her diminished capacity, somebody could have said, well, I'll think ahead or whatever. She's showing her true self. That is the essence of this.
Well, let me speak to that in terms of the technique. Most law enforcement, when they interrogate somebody for a major crime, use what is called the Reid technique, and I believe it's spelled R-E-I-D, as opposed to double E. This is a technique that tries to catch a guilty person in a lie or a change, significant change in their story. And correct me if I'm wrong, Ruth. I think when you are being interrogated and you haven't asked for a lawyer, you weren't smart enough to say, look, I'm not saying nothing
anymore,
until I lawyer up.
Lawyer up. Yeah. All right, we've learned that.
Right. So if that's not stated and you continue going, you have to know that you can ask, am I under arrest? No. Can I leave? Yes. Then you leave.
Okay.
However, if you continue talking and you make a mistake, you are there forever. Okay?
And she believed them when they said,
probably,
you can go home.
You'll go home.
Right.
So that's what she was.
She probably made
yes,
she probably made a mistake. And you had said this, and I think we should say to the public listening to us, yes, indeed, the police can lie in an interrogation.
Yes.
And it has been held up, I think, all the way up to the Supreme Court,
yeah.
if I'm not mistaken. And you can understand why, because you're trying to catch somebody into a lie. And as anybody knows with kids, if you tell them you know that you did this and you know you didn't, then, oh, you caught me, they'll admit to it, okay? So, the thinking's similar to that, okay? But you have to be very careful. This is a young woman with a diminished IQ, and you start wondering whether or not there should have been somebody there right off the bat.
Absolutely.
Okay, to protect the individual. Okay, because there are guardians for people with that IQ.
Absolutely.
Okay, and if people, I've talked to people and they have said, there's no way I would confess to a murder I didn't do. Well, all you have to do is take a look at the captured armed forces, our own, in Vietnam, Korea.
Yeah. God
only knows if there was filming in Japan.
Yeah.
A lot of people that are confessing and writing and saying anything, because a deprivation can
do
be
that.
worse.
Absolutely.
And let's just be blunt about this. We have 4 DNA freed people from Lake County. All 4 had coerced confessions.
Coerced.
All 4. Okay? 3 out of 4, if I'm not mistaken,
had jail time?
Well, they all did. The prosecution said they knew things that only the killer would know. 3 out of 4. They're free now. Okay? And, during the run for state's attorney, both people were saying, we are the poster boy for wrongful convictions in this nation. We're going to change it. Let's start with this one. See if this one
That's what I'm saying is, I would be more than happy, Mr. Nerheim, if you would like, you certainly have the freedom to be on the program. Give me a call. Goodness sakes, we're in the lower level of the Highland Park Police Department. You could be safe here, for goodness sakes. I mean, how much safer could you possibly be, Ruth? And we can either do it with you alone here, or whomever you choose to be with you. I have not a problem with that. I will give you the benefit of the doubt. Absolutely, you're doing your job. But if there is information that comes forward that shows that this is a pre-existing situation, Mr. Nerheim, think if it was one of your children who was sent to jail because someone else had a pre-existing situation and you had to live with that. 33 years in jail? where is developmental disabilities? Where is someone to protect the rights of Melissa? This is really, really heart-wrenching. As a mother of 7 children and a grandmother of 7 children, I can tell you it's heartbreaking to even see the baby fall off a bicycle, let alone die and not come home after a preschool. But then again, the situation lies is you have an innocent. They are both innocent of any criminal activity, obvious to the psyche of anyone. They are both innocent. The child innocent because it was of his own situation, his own doing, banging his head, temper tantrums. Maybe this is going to be a rule for young parents with children of this age grouping, that if they have a temper tantrum, to either get them something to protect their head, one of those football helmets or whatever, or soothe them in some fashion that they won't bang their head. And you have an innocent girl with diminished capacity whose only heart lies with loving and caring for children, who you could hear from our guests would be under such rigorous violent to her questioning. She never showed violence towards them, the law enforcement. So stand tall. We'll have you on the program. We're voters. You know, voting time is coming up. People want to know, are you on the good side or are you on the bad side? And, you know, for all intents and purposes, we're always on the good side, always on the good side. And we name names of bad judges, and heaven knows there are plenty of those, but we name names of those who really don't belong in office, either buying their way in or having people vote 20 times when you're only allowed 1 vote. And we would like you to come down. This is a public invitation, Mr. Nerheim, State's Attorney for Lake County, to come. I'd be happy to send you a DVD of this program. Whatever I can do to stand beside you to show that you are an honorable person with integrity, to do the right thing, and not to put someone in jail for 33 years when she's not responsible for the situation that occurred. Very, very important. Integrity, honesty, integrity, and the people in your office and the people in the county will vote you back in office. Will think much highly of you. This will get news all over the place. Ruth Fuller is here. She certainly is a freelance writer, and she could do that, and I will give you the coverage, whatever you may need. I feel that I should stand beside you because you are our state's attorney here in Lake County, but also I have the right as an American and the Constitution to know that when wrong is created, right has to step in, and the right has to apply to the right proceedings. And this proceeding needs definitely to be opened, reheard, whatever the terminology is. She's already been in jail, 4 years, 22 years old. That's criminal. That's criminal. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. I'm one of the founding members of the Alliance for the Mentally Ill. 35 years ago, I'm not the only one, but one of a few that were there and that they have passed on. We're still pushing the air around because we have seen the wrongdoings to those who have been committed into jail because they didn't understand the law, and that others were taking advantage of them, of which it happens all the time, every day, all the time. And we just had a lady on the program the other day, Mrs. Romero, Mandy Romero, and her husband is ill, mentally ill, and he's been in Cook County Jail for 3 years and never came to trial. We'll give you that number to take care of. She'd appreciate some, some input on that. And she was on the program. We don't know what to do to help those that are less fortunate than we are. We are trying our best to, spread around information and awareness. That's the best we can do, and we would like to do that. The truth always will be first and foremost, and we're sure that you will be able to know the difference between right and wrong, as where someone who is cornered and someone who is being threatened, or someone who's being cajoled or told that they can go home is going to say whatever you want them to say, because the stress of the situation, whatever it may be, even if you get a traffic ticket, it's stressful. You're not in your own territory, you're in somebody else's territory. You don't know how that works. And she certainly was not aware of the fact law enforcement can lie to her and give her any scenario just to make a conviction. This is just heart-wrenching on both accounts, for the child, for the parents, and for the parent of this young lady who is in jail. Anything you want to add to this?
Well,
We've got about 2 minutes left.
I'd like to add that, first of all, the really brave people so far in the story are Dr. Choi and Dr. Jones.
Oh, yes.
Okay? Dr. Choi admitted a mistake. Okay?
That's big.
Kudos. Okay?
That's big.
That's a consummate professional.
That's a professional. That's right.
Dr. Jones didn't have to take it, didn't have to risk the hassle she may, be engaged in if it gets thrown out of court and retried. Took the case, ran with it, spent a ton of time on it, came up with rock solid scientific facts that if it ever does get retried, will be the center of the case. Okay? Those are the two heroes so far right now.
And these are two people with great integrity.
Correct.
And the knowledge to know what they're doing. And they felt that this was totally improper, what had transpired. And they came forward to say, this is evidence to show that this child had a pre-existing situation.
Correct. And that needs to be looked into.
Yeah, absolutely.
I interviewed Melissa at Logan in the prison where she is now, and she's grown a lot. And she's doing very well. And I just want to say that she's strong. She's staying very strong.
Well, it's better when she's out. She can be strong on the outside.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Well, we thank you for allowing us in your home, your place of business, for letting us be there. Have a pleasant evening, a very safe week. See you next week on North Shore Live, Cooper's Corner. Thank you for watching.